Adam here, and today we are going to be continuing reading The Wings of Fire 3. Alright, let's get to it. Let's get back to where we were. Oh, wait, I can just go. Where's chapter 2? Would it be 7? Oh, I have to go back one more. I'm so stupid. Alright, I think this is it. Alright, here we go. Alright. It had been raining for 5 days. Glory officially hated it. She was also not enjoying the comments from the other dragons about how, as a rain wing, she should love this weather. She most certainly did not love this weather. In the caves under the mountain, the dragonets had never been rained on. This downpour felt unnatural and unstoppable and horribly, unpleasantly wet. I don't care if a real rain wing is supposed to like this, she thought as droplets rolled off her snout, seeped deep and seeped through her scales and soaked her wings until until they dragged heavily behind her. If they do, there's something wrong with them. No sensible dragon should enjoy the weather that makes it so hard to fly. 3 moons. Please let them be sensible dragons. Let them be nothing like the story. Everyone said rain wings were useless and lazy, but the tribe lived off by themselves in the rainforest where no one ever saw them, so everyone might be wrong. Glory was really hoping that they were wrong. She shook her whole body and glared at the fog-shrouded sky. What she wanted was more sun. She'd missed the sun her whole life, and she hadn't known it until it hit her scales the day they left the cave. More long, sunny days would be fine by her. Instead, there was this rain, mud, more mud, plus one moaning, groaning, dripping slowpoke of a wounded sea wing. Can we stop? Webbs gasped. I need to rest. He floundered through the mud to a slightly drier spot under a tree. Glory narrowed her eyes at him as the blue-green dragon flopped to the ground. The other dragonette stopped too, exchanging glances. They were walking today instead of flying because Webb said it was easier on his injury, and yet he still asked to stop nearly every 10 steps. Glory was starting to suspect he didn't really want them to get to the rainforest. But why? She wondered. Is he hiding something? Does it have to do with my parents? As the guardian who had stolen her from the Rainwing tribe in the first place, Webb should have been a helpful fount of knowledge about where she came from. Instead, he got all mumbly and forgetful whenever they asked about the rainforest dragon. Clay paced over to Webb's and peered down at his wound. Then they'd wrapped it with seaweed soaked in ocean water for as long as they could, but now they're far too inland to get any more. The poisoned scratch near Webb's tail had become an ugly gash surrounded by blackened scales, and the black seemed to spread more each day. None of them had any idea what to do to combat sandwing poison, not to mention they had no idea why Blister wanted Webb's dead so badly. I mean, I think he's awful, but she doesn't even know him. Lori glanced at Starflight, the black nightwing, who was the smartest dragonette she knew, and probably still would be even if she knew more than 4 dragons. She wondered if they had any theories about Blister and Webbs. Clay swept his tail through the mud, looking worried. I hope the Rainwings can help him, he said. This isn't exactly like their venom, but maybe they'll have more ideas than we do. Glory shook out her wings and looked away. She didn't care if the other dragonets felt some kind of misguided loyalty to their old guardian, as if it was their responsibility to save him. She was the only one who seemed to remember how he'd been willing to stand by and let someone kill her. Stealing her egg had been his idea too. The prophecy called for a skywing, but when the Talons lost their skywing egg before it hatched, Webbs had decided to replace it with a rainwing. It was his fault that Glory had been forced to grow up under the mountain, far from her home and family, learning about a prophecy that didn't even have a place for her in it. It was easy for the others. There was no question about their destiny. But Glory, if she was meant to help save the world, then why hadn't the prophecy called for a rainwing? And if she wasn't necessary for this big grand destiny, then what was the point of her life at all? Maybe it was one big mistake, but when she thought like that, she ended up having violent dreams about ripping webs apart. So it's better not to think about it. Destiny would have to sort itself out. Right now, she was going home. The branch above Glory suddenly dipped and dumped a lake's worth of water onto her head. She leaped back with a hiss and glared up into the tree. Shh, Tsunami said from above. She dropped down to the ground and peered at the gloomy swamp. There's a pair of mudwings headed this way, but they'll never see us in this weather. Rolls of thick gray fog hung over the mud, wreathing over stunted trees like smoke around a dragon's form. It was hard to tell what time of day it was. The sky was gray in every direction, and the rain drizzled down unrelentlessly. Glory agreed with Tsunami. A dragon could barely see her own wingtips in this, let alone another dragon. We should still hide, Starflight said anxiously. We're only a day's flight from Queen Morin's power right now. If we get caught, more prison, Clay said with a sigh. Every queen they'd met so far seemed determined to keep the dragonets trapped under her claws. They'd escaped Queen Scarlet's prison in Sky Kingdom only because of Glory's venom, a secret weapon she hadn't even known about until she'd needed it. She touched her forked tongue to her fangs and glanced at the sky. They still had no idea Queen Scarlet had survived Glory's attack. Given their luck, Glory was pretty sure Scarlet was still alive and planning some horrible revenge. After that escape, they'd gone looking for safety with Tsunami's mother, Queen Coral of the Sea Wings. Of course, Coral had decided to lock them up as well. Glory hadn't been surprised. Not even family could be trusted when it came to the prophecy. Everyone had their own plans for how this war should end. So, if Queen Morin of the Mudwings found them in her territory, she probably wasn't going to give them tea and send them on their way. The Mudwing Queen held a court beside a large lake on the southern edge of the Mud Kingdom. Glory remembered the map of Pyria, and a shiver of realization ran down her spine. If Starflight was right and they were only a day's flight from there, then they must only be a day's flight from the rainforest as well. From the rainforest and Glory's tribe. And then I'll belong somewhere. The Rainwings won't care that I'm not in some prophecy. Glory, Tsunami scolded. Bright yellow scales are the only thing they might see. Go to camouflage. Glory glanced down and saw the starburst of gold that had appeared across her scales. Those meant happiness or excited as far as she knew. She'd see them pretty rarely in her life. It drove her crazy when her scales changed color without her telling them to. They did that way too often. She had to squash every big emotion before it splattered all over her. She concentrated on the steady drip of the swamp around them, staring down at the thick brown mud oozing through her claws. She imagined the fog winding around her wings, slipping into the cracks in her scales and spreading light gray clouds rolling across the sky. And she's gone, Tsunami said. She's still there, Sunny piped up. She edged closer to Glory and bumped into one of her wings. See? Right there. She stretched out a talon, but Glory moved out of reach. Sunny felt around in the air for a moment and then gave up. The little sandwing had been unusually quiet for the last few days. Glory guessed that Sunny hated the rain too. The desert dragons were assigned for searing heat, blazing sun, and endless clear sky days. Even an odd-looking sandwing like Sunny still had the instincts of her tribe. Really, Clay was the only one happy about the weather. Only a mudwing could appreciate the squishing and squashing under their claws as they traveled through the swamp. Starflight swiveled his head suddenly. I think I smell someone coming, he whispered. He shuddered from horns to claws. Don't panic, Tsunami whispered back. Clay, you hide me and Sunny. Starlight, find a shadow and do your invisible petrified nightwing thing. Glory, you can shield webs. No thanks, said Glory immediately. She wasn't going anywhere near webs, certainly not to save his life. I'll take Sunny. She didn't like touching other dragons, but Sunny was better than webs. But Tsunami started, stamping her foot. Glory ignored her. She lifted one wing and tugged the little gold dragon in close. And when she lowered her wing again, Sunny was hidden by Glory's gray-brown camouflage. Yikes, Glay said. That was so weird, like Sunny just got eaten by the fog. His stomach grumbled woefully at the word eaten, and Mudwing shuffled his big feet in embarrassment. Starflight Starflight peered at the spot where Sunny had just been, twisting his claws in the mud. She's fine, Glory said. Go follow orders like a good dragonet, or Tsunami might fling you to the eels. Tsunami frowned in her direction, but Starflight sunk away and found a dark hollow tree where his black scales melted into the shadows. Now Glory could hear it too. The tramp squelch of enormous claws marching through the swamp towards them. The heat from Sunny's scales was uncomfortably warm against her side. Webbs hadn't moved while they talked. He laid curled against the tree's roots, snout resting on his tail, looking miserable. Clay shepherded Tsunami up against Webbs and spread his mud-colored wings to hide them both. It wasn't a perfect solution. A blue tail snuck out on one side, the edge of a blue-green wings on the other. But in this fog, they looked mostly like a blobby mountain of mud, which should be good enough. Tramp squelch. Tramp squelch. I don't like this patrol, a deep voice grumbled. Glory nearly jumped. It sounded like it was coming from 2 trees away. Too close to that creepy rainforest, you ask me. It's not really haunted, said a second voice. You know, the only things that live there are birds and lazy rainwings. Years of learning self-control kept Glory from flinching. She'd heard lazy rainwings thrown around often by enough guardians under the mountain. But it felt like an extra stab in the eye to hear it from a total stranger. If that were true, said the first voice, then Her Majesty would let us hunt in there. But she knows it's not safe. And you heard the noises at night. Are you telling me it's the rainwings screaming like that? Screaming? Under Glory's wings, Sunny turned her head a little, as if she were trying to hear better. Not to mention the dead bodies, the first voice muttered. That's not some kind of rainforest monster, said the second guard, but there was a tilt in her tone that sounded unsure. That's the war. Some kind of guerrilla attacks to scare us. All the way down here? Why would the sea wings or the ice wings come all this way to kill 1 or 2 mud wings here and there? There are bigger battles going on everywhere else. Let's go a bit faster, said the second voice uneasily. They should really let us patrol these in 3s or 4s instead of in pairs. Tell me about it. Tramp squelch, tramp squelch. So, what do you think about the Skywing situation? Are you for Ruby, or do you think? Glory strained her ears, but the voices faded into the mist as the 2 Mudwing soldiers flushed away. She badly wanted to know what the Skywing situation was. Maybe her friends wouldn't notice she slipped away for a second. Be right back, she whispered to Sunny, lifting her wings and stepping away. Sunny caught her tail, wide-eyed. Don't go, she whispered. It's not safe. You heard what they said. About rainforest monsters? Glory rolled her eyes. Can't say I'm terribly worried about that. I won't go far. She shook Sunny off and slipped after the soldiers, carefully minding only the dry patches so her claws wouldn't splash in the mud. It was weirdly quiet in the swamp, especially with the fog muffling most sounds. She tried to follow the distant rumble of voices and what she thought might be the sound of marching mudwing talons. But after a few moments, even those became impossible to hear. She stopped listening. The trees dripped. Rain drizzled moodily through the branches. Small gurgles burbled out of the mud here and there, as if the swamp were hiccupping. And then a scream tore through the air. Gloria's ruff flared in fear, and pale green stripes zigzagged through her scales. She fought back her terror, focusing her colors back to gray and brown. Glory! Sunny yelled, behind her somewhere. Shut up, Gloria thought furiously. Don't draw attention. Don't let anyone know we're here. The other dragonets must have had the same thought and stopped her, because Sunny didn't call out again. Unless it was one of them who screamed. But it couldn't have been. The scream had come from somewhere up ahead. Glory checked her scales again to make sure she was well hidden and sped up, hurrying through the trees towards the scream. The fog was so dense she nearly missed the 2 lumps that looked like fallen logs. But her claws came down on something that was decidedly a dragonstone. She leaped back. 2 brown dragons were sprawled in the mud, surrounded by pools of blood that were already being washed away by the rain. Their throats had been ripped out so viciously that their heads were nearly severed from their bodies. Gloria stared into the rolling gray fog, but nothing moved except the rain. The mud-winged soldiers were dead, and there was no sign of what had killed them. Remind me why we're walking toward the place with the monsters and screaming and something that kills dragons? Clay asked. We could go somewhere else, Starflight said. Maybe to the Ice Wings. The Ice Wings, yes, Clay said. Sounds like a great plan. Let's do that. No mysterious dragon-killing things in the Ice Kingdom, right? What are those animals they have up there? Penguins? I bet I could beat a penguin or two in battle. Couldn't I? How big are they? Maybe just one penguin. So we can freeze to death instead, Glory said. A rumor and a couple dead soldiers weren't going to scare her away from her home. Not when she was finally this close. Fantastic plans, Starlight. Not to mention the Ice Kingdom is half a continent away, while the rainforest is right here. Besides, webs will never make it all the way to the Ice Kingdom, Sunny chimed in. She glanced nervously up the trees, which seemed to be getting taller and taller as they walked. It was also warmer the farther they went, and in the vines overhead, Glory could see flashes of color. The bright bright summer yellows and purples and blues might have been birds or flowers, but they were definitely not typical of the brown mud kingdom. Glory wasn't sure, but she guessed the dragonettes were in the forest for real now. She gnarled claw shapes of marsh trees were only a half day behind them, and so were the mud-winged bodies. Tsunami had wanted to search the area for clues, but she had been outvoted by the other dragonettes when Starflight pointed out how they'd really be in trouble if they were caught next to a double murder. Not to mention whatever killed the soldiers couldn't have gone far. That was enough to get everyone, even Webbs, to fly through the night, and they'd circled down the walk to see only once the sun was up and they were looking for food. See, Glory said to Clay and Starflight, even Sunny is acting braver than you scaredy scavengers. Even Sunny? The Sandway flared. What's that supposed to mean? I'm brave all the time! She lashed her tail and ducked away when Clay reached to pat her on the head. Warm bursts of sunlight nudged through the leafy canopy, making all the scales glow. Glory let her scales turn whatever color they wanted. A shimmery beetle green spread all over her, touched here and there with curls of amber. She liked the feeling of matching the trees and sunbeams. We'll be there soon, she thought, with a shiver of anticipation. But I mustn't get my hopes up. Maybe it won't be what I imagine. It just have to be better than life under the mountain, trapped in a cave by guardians who hate me. I'm not setting the bar too high here, I think. Something cackled off to the left. When Glory whipped around, all she saw was a shaggy gray sloth hanging from a tree and blinking sleepily at her. Have I mentioned this place makes me nervous? Clay asked. Only 1,000 times, Glory said. I wish we knew what the mudwings were talking about, Sunny said. How can they live right next to the rainforest and not know why it's dangerous? How can the rainwings live in the forest if it's all that dangerous? Glory countered. Webb sniffed faintly, the first sound he'd made in a while. He muttered, because they're rainwings, they probably haven't even noticed. Glory glared at him. Maybe you'd like a matching venomous wound on your other side, she snarled. Tsunami whirled and grabbed Webb's snout. The bigger sea wing snorted with surprise and tried to jerk back, but she held him firmly so she could glare into his face. All right, enough. What do you know about this? She demanded. You're the only one who's been in the rainforest. Doesn't have some kind of monster? She took a snout, none too gently. Stop drooping like a wet farm and tell us what you know. Nothing, Webbs mumbled through Tsunami's grip. Stamp on his tail, Glory suggested. Or poke that scratch. That'll get him talking. Don't be horrible, Sunny said. She nudged their guardian's shoulder with her snout. Webbs, please warn us if you know something. It's not safe for you either. Webb sighed and Tsunami let go of him. I swear, don't know anything about a monster, he said. I didn't see anything dangerous when I snuck in to steal Glory's egg. Honestly, it was really easy. It was the night before the brightest night, so you could tell which eggs were about to hatch. And I just took one and flew back to the mountains. I didn't even run into any rain wings, let alone a monster. My parents weren't guarding their nest, Gloria? Webbs looked down at his talons and shook his head. I think I'm going to stop for tonight.